And I think this will be probably the best part of the day, and I have put together, she says proudly, a panel of amazing parents, chaired by an amazing parent. What you don't know is I've actually co-opted a new one at the end, Kate, who's not in your program, and that's because Kate has got an incredible story, and she's just back about, a month ago from Rome. And to say it in a nutshell, I'm sure she'll say it better, but Kate is a barrister who had to give up her career for just over a year because her son Tom was diagnosed with a terrible disorder called Batten's disease. And whilst we've been talking about terrible disorders all day, this disorder you come along with at 3 or 4 years of age and you die by the age of 6. And so there was an experimental therapy, a precision medicine, and Kate and her husband and family had to decide, do they go to Rome, which was the only place you could get it, 4 sites in the world, and have this experimental medicine injected into the brain every 2 weeks via a little reservoir in order to keep her son Tom alive. And the story is amazing, and they've been back just a month. But I'll let her tell you more about that, but I hope you'll realise why I've co-opted her at no notice. And first, though, we have our amazing chair. Some of you will have heard Sara, who closed the last one of these meetings, with her story about KCNQ2 and how that mutation of KCNQ2 affects her beautiful daughter, Jackie. Now, Sara is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, so she's much better at all of this than I am. And she was on ABC News 24's coverage of that very extraordinary 2016 US election, which has changed all our lives. But I've asked Sara... I've asked Sara to chair the panel today, so thank you, Sara.
Thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. Ingrid knows that, and I'm sure we all share this, that pretty much anything that she would ask me to do, I would say yes, when. And I think we're all thrilled to be part of the team Ingrid. And we share something else as well, which is, although I haven't met all of you, I've met some of you, but it occurs to me that in a way we're kind of family. And that's because our kids are cousins. And our kids are cousins even though they haven't met, because you wouldn't be in this room if everything were absolutely fantastically perfect and nothing had ever happened to derail your universe. You're here because something did, and because you have epilepsy in your life. And so I say your family because really there are things that you would understand about Jackie, about KCNQ2, about our life that some people in my family wouldn't understand as well as you do. So I think it's really an incredible opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from other parents about their journey. And I will go one by one. We have lots of questions, and I want to get to all of them. I'm going to start with you, Kate, as the person who's traveled the farthest to get here. Wow, what a story. When we hear about precision medicine, Kate, I think that's a new term that's bubbling around. Some people in this room may be well familiar with it, others aren't. I'd like to know about what this has meant for your family, and also about that kind of leading as parents, making really tough decisions, including giving up a career.
Right, that's why I didn't travel that far, because I now live in Hawthorne.
Yes, all the way from Hawthorne. Yes, and thank you for using the microphone. It's probably, hopefully it's got a button. If not, I'll swing you over to this one.
So, firstly...
No, don't worry, technical. There we go.
In terms of precision medicine, what Ingrid didn't mention is it's a 5-hour infusion, and my son is 4 years and 10 months old and a very active little boy, which is both wonderful and hard when he can't move in a hospital bed for 5 hours every 2 weeks. What he receives is, they've made a synthetic version of the protein that he's missing in his brain, and he has a reservoir in under his scalp, and he receives an infusion of the synthetic version of the enzyme directly into the reservoir, where it goes down directly into his brain. So his condition has a terrible prognosis, but luckily for us, in terms of parents making decisions and hard decisions, I think we did what any parent in the room would do if they could. which is anything. We were told in terms in June last year that there was no hope, and that we sort of were told to go away and come back when his symptoms got worse. It's hard, for the doctors in the room, don't tell parents there's no hope, because hope comes in different forms. And for us, when we were told there was no hope, we found there was a clinical trial through Ingrid's wonderful connections. We were granted a place on that clinical trial, and the choice was to give, my husband and I were both full-time working, and we gave up that, and we gave up our community, our friends, right at the time when we probably needed them most, and we moved to Rome on 2 weeks' notice. And it was absolutely the right decision for us, because that drug has now received approval by the FDA on the 27th of April this year, and it received approval in Europe on the 1st of June. And that has allowed us to now, because Tom is no longer eligible for treatment in Europe or in the US, we've been able to move his treatment back to Australia. So it's been the right decision for us. But there were certainly times in Italy when we were sitting there without our family and friends, without our jobs, thinking, what on earth are we doing? Because we were, chasing a dream. And it was a hard decision, but I think it's one that any parent would do.
Kate, if I could ask you a follow-up to that. I think one of the aspects of being a parent of a child with a condition that's relatively recently discovered, or a child where things are changing and new possibilities are coming online, is almost this daily set of decisions about what should we do. Trying new drugs, trying new medicines or old drugs that haven't been used for a particular disorder. How hard is it to be, if you will, your own personal FDA? Because, it's tough to be a pioneer, and anybody who's read any stories about pioneers, you get a little beaten up on the way.
In our case, it wasn't as tough, because I think contrary to some of the cases where there might be multiple drugs to treat seizures that are being tested, in Tom's condition, late infantile Batten disease, there's gene therapy trials, there's the enzyme replacement therapy, which is what we did, and then there have been some stem cell work. But we, and bone marrow, I think, the data was pretty clear that the enzyme replacement therapy was the leading therapy. And because we have a very short period of time in which to do anything, we didn't have much difficulty in choosing.
I'll come back to you if I can. Caterina, I'm going to come on to you for a moment, and I want to shift gears because every parent brings something a little bit different to this panel. So I'd love for you to tell us about what brings you here, why you're here as a parent, about your own family situation. And I know that your area of being a pioneer is really doing some of the slashing through the forests that's brought the NDIS to all of our doorsteps. So if you can talk a little bit about that way in which you've led and why you did it.
Thank you. And firstly, thank you, Ingrid, for inviting me here today. Okay, so basically for all of you that would know, the NDIS is an allocation of funding by the government to assist the participants, primarily our children, I would say for a better quality of life. It's not only for the child or the participant, it's also for us families. So what I've learnt first and foremost is that we need to ask for help, and we need to learn to accept help. We can't do it all. We're all miracle mums and dads and carers, but we can't do it all. So basically what I did is we were fortunate enough to transition early to the NDIS. I live in the municipality of Manningham, so it doesn't roll out till November this year. And, pardon? You mentioned Melbourne, Victoria. Oh, Melbourne, Victoria. And I was fortunate enough to transition early in January. So with very, very little notice, basically all I did was work out what services we had in place, and what services we wanted. So it's not only, the way I looked at it is it's not only for the participant, which is my nearly 13-year-old, beautiful, bubbly, very energetic little boy, but also for my family unit as a whole, and also me despite the fact that I do have a husband, but I am the primary caregiver for my child, and I need to be of healthy mind to be able to care for him. So basically worked out what services he needed and created a wish list. And so far, it's been very good. So
Let me ask you about that, because you're the mom of Marco and Lucas. And I think, how many, just a show of hands, and I wish I could ask all of you that are watching by Facebook, but maybe you can send us in your answers. But for those in the room, how many of you have more than one child? That's a large number. So for those who are watching us on the internet, that's the majority of hands in the room are going up here. I'm also a mom of more than one child, and I think that there are real stresses for the typically developing neurologically typical sibling. Have you found that to be true, and do you think that the NDIS or some of the programs that you're learning about are helpful in terms of meeting the needs of both your children?
absolutely. Look, it works twofold. So obviously I've got two children. Lucas is a very active, sporty boy, and having to drag literally Marco to swimming, where we've lost probably 2 iPads and an iPod in a swimming pool through frustration, to basketball, to soccer, and me having to remove myself and Marco because, you know, he's, not that he's been disruptive, but he wasn't in an environment that he obviously felt comfortable in. So like this, I can get Marco cared for and literally give Lucas 110% of my attention. So yeah, I've now got the best of both worlds, I think, and so have my kids.
All right, let me move, if I can, to you, Danielle. Danielle, you also, I mean, Ingrid has picked quite a range of incredible panelists. Your situation, if you can tell us about your children, because you have more than one situation in your house. Yeah, go for it. Tell me about your beautiful children, Jaylee and Ellie.
So we've got 2 girls, both have the exact same genetic mutation, which is called SYNGAP. So they've got a rare genetic condition which manifests in a few different seizure types: autism, intellectual disability, hyperactivity, ADHD. I was looking at that list from the behavioural doc, and I was thinking tick, 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 tick. We had all those things. So they've got a broad range of conditions, and they're 2 years apart. So when we first realised that something was wrong with our eldest, I was already pregnant with my second. So, and when we first realised something was wrong, we actually just thought it was epilepsy. We didn't realise that there were all these other symptoms. So I actually feel grateful sitting here listening to your story, because we've got our prognosis is unknown, but we know of kids in our community that are older than us. So we didn't have that compressed pressure that you had. So we've gone about our business in a slightly different way, but I feel slightly grateful. But obviously admire what you've done completely.
In terms of the work that you've done, you got your diagnosis in 2016, is that right?
February last year.
So 2016, we're talking 1 year, and I have the advantage of having the parent panel information sheet. And for those of you who can't read this fine print from where you are sitting, basically it is one thing after another. Danielle has been a powerhouse, not only in terms of getting a community here for people who have SYNGAP, but connecting to international bodies, also dealing with international healthcare organizations, getting checklists, and trying to connect to other families. Can you talk about, as a parent who is trying to lead, first of all, how you balance all of this, because you do have a job, but also what you're doing to connect and why you think that's important?
So I realised when we got our diagnosis last year that we were only one of 250 in the world. So I've since found out the prevalence is expected to be a lot higher than who's been diagnosed. They're expecting 1 to 2% of all intellectual disability cases in the world are expected to have SYNGAP. It's just that it's just a newly diagnosed gene that people don't actually know they've got it. So that's equivalent to 1.5 million people in the world, and only 250 right now who are diagnosed. So I realised pretty quickly that the awareness was a problem, or lack of awareness was a problem, and I connected to the other SYNGAP parents through Facebook, and I asked initially what kind of data do we have on SYNGAP, just assuming that there would be some data around what are the symptoms, what are the trends when you've got this type of genetic mutation, are you more likely to have these types of symptoms? And there was no data there. So the first thing I did was a parent survey, and I was warned by, in fact, Ingrid, I think, warned me and then laughed at me when I presented it to her afterwards. But I prepared with another mum in America, we prepared a parent survey just on SurveyMonkey. And full disclosure, we said we will try and follow data privacy laws as best we can, but this is a parent survey and you're coming into this just to get the data out of it. So the condition of giving your information in was that you would actually get the report at the end of it. So we were quite strict with that because we wanted people to enrol. Anyway, we did this survey, we got an output, and it was a really interesting literature paper, and as I said, when I showed it to Ingrid, I was very proud of it. She laughed and said, "Oh, this is just what parents say."
Okay, all right, hang on. You do not get equal time, by the way, because I'm running this.
But she went one better. She said, "This is what parents say. However, I've got a doctorate, a postdoctorate medical student who will take this and actually validate it scientifically." And that's what they're doing right now. And Danique there is our SYNGAP.
Can you raise your hand?
researcher.
SYNGAP star. We have our SYNGAP star over there. But Danielle, just quickly, and then I want to move to another person in the room. And that's leading, isn't it? In other words, do you have to kind of rattle the establishment a little bit, even outstanding star doctors, whom we refer to, amongst ourselves as God? Even God occasionally must be questioned. Is that fair?
Oh, you've got to challenge everything. And then,
all right, even God. Okay, Joe, how about you? I'll move on. I'm going to come back in a second. But Joe, let me ask you, you've also traveled quite a distance to get here, not from Rome or Hawthorne. But in terms of this precision medicine piece, you've made some significant sacrifices on the family front to help your child. Can you talk about that?
I've got a 13-year-old son that's got Dravet, diagnosed when he was about 4.5, although his first seizure was at 8 months old, and he was textbook, 100% textbook. One of the benefits of living 4.5 hours north of Melbourne is that we never got diagnosed until he was 4.5. So we went through a series of medications that we shouldn't have been on because we never got access to the gods of the world. Sorry, what was the question?
I just love the answer so much, it really doesn't matter. But what I wanted to ask you was, you've taken it upon yourself to do a drive. You do live in a more remote community. You live on a farm.
Yeah,
and that brings a lot of positives, but it also brings distance from care.
We live 4.5 hours north of Melbourne, and we, like everybody else in the room, will do anything to what we can do for our children. It was suggested by Ingrid that we try the flenfluramine trial at the end of last year, and there was a lot of talk, negative talk on Facebook and so forth about the weight loss side of it. And my son, I think, is fairly classic Dravet. He's a fairly thin lad, although that's genetic too. It's a family, we're all tall and relatively thin. So anyway, at that point in time, I was quite concerned because although he was only having 2 or 3 seizures a week, kids were dying at this age. And where were we at? And we'd had a 40-minute seizure and what is in front of us? So we said, yes, we'll do the flenfluramine trial. Since January, I have done 10 drives to Melbourne. We've done just over 10,000 kilometres, 12 trips, just over 10,000 kilometres, and most of them are day trips. So my lovely mother-in-law would start at 5 o'clock in the morning and would get home at sort of 6 o'clock at night. And Ryan is 99% seizure-free.
So yes.
So we run a fairly substantial business and we just made this happen. And when we turn up at the Austin and something goes wrong with the heart echocardiogram, and they've got issues and America's going crook, that they've got the wrong leads, and they say, sorry, you'll have to come back next week. We get back in the car, we go and have lunch in the cafeteria or a coffee, and we get back in the car and we drive home again.
Can I just, I'm going to stop you right there, because we've heard this from everybody so far. Tom, I promise we're coming to you, but this is the theme, and I hear it again and again and again from parents. We just do what we have to do. Well, yes, but what parents have to do is a really, really big ask.
Yeah, but one of the main reasons why I do this, apart from the huge benefit my son gets, is that 1-year-old out there that's getting diagnosed today, I know that in another year or two, that child will get fluorophone and will have seizure control and won't go through the crap that we've had, where we've had 13 years of 8 different drugs that do or don't work, that make seizures worse. It's for the benefit of those new kids coming through.
If you were going to say something to those moms and dads, what would you tell them? What would be the advice you give those parents out there? How many parents have little kids, by the way? All right, we have some. So what's your advice for the parents of the newbies in the group? Because this can be exciting and it can be a little daunting.
Get educated. Educate yourself. You need to know more than the doctors.
It's not on Google.
No, totally not on Facebook. Although there's some advantages with.
But there are challenges, aren't there? I mean, yeah, every bit of advice is going to have to come with like an asterisk, isn't it? Because not on Facebook, unless it's a Facebook page dedicated to your group, in which case it's probably a really good idea, and not on Google unless it's to connect to real research. So you're going to have to be a reporter. You're going to have to be, skill up, get savvy, and you already are because you're here, and you're on Facebook. And you're streaming right now. So we know Facebook can work because that's how some of you are watching us. Let me move, if I can, to you, Tom. And first of all, may we have a big round of applause for masculine energy. And bravely getting up here and talking about your situation. Now, Tom and I are also cousins. We share the fact that we have an accent that is not originally, authentically Australian. Can you tell us about what brought you to Melbourne?
My lovely partner brought me to Melbourne, Sam Jackson, who many of you know. Me and Sam met around about 16 years ago in London. And yeah, very gladly made the move over here to Melbourne and haven't regretted it since.
So you had your lovely wife, your beautiful boy.
Sure, yeah, Luke.
And little Luke, everything is going pretty swimmingly until it isn't. When did things start to go south, and when did you get a diagnosis?
Okay, so Luke had his first seizure at 6 months of age, which was just after his, about 12 hours or so after his vaccinations. So obviously we automatically thought that was a causative of that. You mentioned educating yourself, and that's very much what we did, and it became apparent that wasn't actually, whilst it was a reaction to that, it certainly wasn't the cause of his Dravet. We went through a lot in a 6-month period. We did Google. We did look at everything. We didn't know what was going on. I remember one moment at Monash Medical Centre, we were walking around and we looked in this notice board and it had a sign up there and Luke had been admitted for about a week at that point, and it was this Dravet, SCM1A mutation, Dravet syndrome, catastrophic form of epilepsy. And I remember turning turned to Sam and said, God, well, it could be worse, he could have that. And, and then around about a month later, under the direction of Michael Heyman at the time, and we questioned it, and Michael said, actually, I had been thinking about that, and we went off. At that point, you had to pay for all the genetic tests and things like that. We went off and got it. And so we got the diagnosis around about 13 months. So we were fortunate in a way, and that he was fairly young when he was diagnosed.
I'm noticing an optimism streak, which I really appreciate. There's a lot of optimism here in this room, and I do think it's a great quality to keep you going forward. For those of you who've had the opportunity to see the film Jabbed, then you probably know a little bit already about Tom's story. If you haven't, look it up, get a chance to see that about vaccination and about what our kids have. I think I adore Australia. I am now half Australian, not sure which half, but I am half Australian. I do think that this is a culture, and I think indeed all cultures, America as well, where it's harder for guys to talk about sad stuff, hard stuff, things that aren't going right. Do you think that's true? And how do you deal with the emotional aspect, even as an optimistic person?
Yeah, I think that's just basically true, probably of the Western world, as you say. Look at it, they're a hugely emotional thing. I mean, Luke's nearly 12 now, and I remember diagnosis was absolute, devastation. The world ended that day. It was just awful. I remember being at the crossing at Carnegie, and the railway lines, the boom gates came down, and I just broke down. I couldn't do anything. It was awful. But then you move on from that. You have to. You have to have that positive outlook, or else, what is? And you have to keep that for Luke as well. Luke knows he's different. Don't get me wrong. Luke is very aware that he's different and he's not normal. Luke, however, just thinks he's better than everybody else. So
I saw some video of Luke a moment ago. He pretty much demonstrably is.
Yeah. So so you have to remain that positive thing. But God, it hits you, and it gets you at really odd, like even now, last week, my sisters were over from the UK. We stayed in a beautiful hotel. It was wonderful. I went down for breakfast one morning by myself, actually, and Sam was up in the room with Luke, and I sat there, and there was another father sitting there with his boy, probably about 10, 11 years old, similar age to Luke. And they were having a great old time, having breakfast, having a chat, my assumption is that the wife was up in the room having a lie-in. Probably wasn't, but, and it really hit me. I really choked up. And that's after 12 years. It's still, does it get easier? No, but do you learn to cope with it? Yes, you do. And you have to stay positive, as I was saying. We are, myself and Sam, and everyone who I've met, I don't know anybody who has crawled into a hole and not got on with it. And it's look, did we choose it? Absolutely not, but embrace it.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's wise. I want to ask all of you on the panel, and I want everybody to raise their hand at this moment because everybody's had a chance to talk, so jump in. You're all parents who have had your own personal odyssey. You've also had the bigger questions about what do I do, how do I lead, how do we move the ball forward? What do we need to do? Because every single one of us is here because we want our kids to get better. We want to put, a nail in the coffin of these terrible epilepsies. We want to all have a drug trial. What do we need to do? Feel free, raise your hand, and I'll call on you. What's it going to take? Danielle, I see you. I saw your eyebrows, not your hand. Yes.
Is this the one that's on?
Go for it.
I don't know if that's another segue, Sarah.
It could be. Alley-oop, you get to go the slam dunk.
There's a few families that have gotten together. In fact, they're all here, or one representative from each family. David Cunningham's over there.
David Cunnington, can you stand up for us, please? This is a partner in medicine and crime. Yes, go for it.
Sarah's one family, and my family is the third family. And we tried to answer this question with a group called GETTR, which was Genetic Epilepsy Team Australia, and we were quite specific with the naming of it. We wanted it to be broad enough to not just be about children. We wanted it obviously to have a genetic focus. And the mission of this group is to find a cure for genetic epilepsies. It's quite pure. It's quite bold and it's quite ambitious, but we believe that it's achievable, and we just hope it's achievable in our lifetimes. And what we're hoping to do is get some investment into research in Australia, so that we can move closer to that cure. But we'll take it if it's happening in America or Holland or wherever it may be. We'll take it. We're not fussy, but that's what we thought.
Or Italy, Rome.
Wherever it is, we'll take it. But I think it's collaboration and partnership with other researchers is another key part to the puzzle, which I don't have an answer for, but I'm trying to speak to every SYNGAP researcher in the world to try and get them on the same page and to make sure that we're not overlapping and overdoing one particular theory. So collaboration, I think, is important. Awareness is important, and just driving and being optimistic towards that bold, perhaps unrealistic, but we've got to be optimistic goal.
Well, inspirational and aspirational, right? I mean, that's the goal, is to get things changed. Yes, Kate.
Obviously, we didn't set up our clinical trial, but to follow on from that, in our case, early diagnosis was key and indeed it has changed the outcome of our lives and Tom's life, because people with Tom's condition aren't usually diagnosed for years until they've lost all function. And the treatment that he now gets, which is now an approved treatment and is the standard of care in the US, really it's been shown and approved on the basis that it slows the progression of the disease. In Tom's case, he's stabilised, he's seizure-free, and he's actually improved in terms of his motor skills and his speech. But if he hadn't been diagnosed when he was 3.5, thanks to Ingrid and others, we never would have got him on the clinical trial. There was a coincidence and lack of timing as well. But for children who have his condition but they're older, they are receiving the drug, but it might have stabilised them perhaps in terms of seizures, but it isn't necessarily preserving their life quality in other ways.
So in other words, if I'm assessing this correctly, it is keeping them where they are now, which may not be as good as where they were last year or the year before. Is that accurate?
That's exactly accurate. So early diagnosis, once the trial exists,
you want to catch it as quickly as possible.
Get them on as soon as possible.
Let me go back, if I can, to Tom for a minute. And Caterina, you tell me if this is the case for you too. It might be for you, Joe. When was your diagnosis?
I think he was like 13 months.
So 2000...
Oh, sorry. Oh, God, you're asking me how old he is now.
2009,
2000
maybe?
And early 2007.
2007. So you've been sitting with the diagnosis since, Ingrid? No? Yes? 2007? Yes, roughly? The diagnosis for Dravet, for Luke?
Yeah. No, that's right, yeah. We were January 2007, we met Ingrid later that year, actually.
All right. So 2007, you got this diagnosis. What have you seen in terms of the changes, positive and negative, if there are any, in terms of what's known about Dravet and, parents being able to lead the way forward? What have you seen in that time?
Well, it's interesting you said before about being one of 250, because when we had our diagnosis of Dravet, we were one of 500 in the world. Well, that's what we were told at that time.
And now?
So, well, I would defer to Ingrid for the numbers, but I would venture to say there's many more than 500 probably in Australia.
10,000, we're hearing the number of 10,000 in the world.
Yeah.
And now it's become not commonplace, but yes, it's known.
Yeah, absolutely not common, but certainly known, and the information that's out there is far greater. So when we had that, we felt a little bit alone. Or it's a big or a small number. Being 500, 1 in 500, and yeah. So, but in regard to the changes in the last 10 or 11 years, we look. The first drug we were put on was Tegretol, for example, which. Now it's pretty well known that that's not great for Dravet. We were then moved off that pretty quickly. So, we were really fortunate to be, or in my opinion, very fortunate to be put on the stiripentral trial, which has done wonders for Luke in terms of seizure management. We constantly feel that there's breakthroughs coming on. Now, I'm very much a realist, and I'm not sitting here saying that I'm expecting Luke will be cured and will suddenly become an astronaut, because that's not going to happen. But you know, that you can definitely see progression there. There's things that are happening, you know, so they haven't been here all day, so you probably know more about this than me, but around the cannabis trials and things like that that are happening at the moment, the snake venom and all this kind of stuff, you know, so it's really interesting stuff that's going on. And I just want to go back to the point that you made before, then I think, you know, we have to maintain, we have to keep challenging that and keep challenging God and keep doing that, because
that's hard to do, though, isn't it? You know, because
it
Ingrid's not
is,
wearing
but
her white coat now, but there is a white coat phenomenon.
Oh, look,
about
there
the
absolutely
medical
is.
establishment.
And I remember when we first got an appointment to see, again, going back to Michael Heyman, I put a suit on for that. You know, I was really, it was
daunting.
It was incredible, yeah. Now, Ingrid will tell you, I'll rock up with shorts and a t-shirt, you know, and
singlet.
yeah, well, no, that's a bit too Australian for me.
No, okay.
But
well, you're a Brit, right?
But you know, but you become more confident as well as time goes on. You know, so Luke's 12 now. We've been seeing Ingrid for probably about 10-ish years, and
that, you know what? Can I pick up on that point, because you're spot on? I want to go to you, Caterina. I think that what you just said, you grow more confident. Have you grown to believe that? I mean, because I have. I think that the gods of this world, and they're not a lot, and we're lucky to have Ingrid. But I feel like when I go in to see Ingrid, what's great is that she treats me as the expert on Jackie, because I see her every single day. How many of you in this room feel like you are the expert on your kid? Well, you are. You absolutely are. And how is that? Have you found that growing confidence, Caterina, and how's that changed in terms of your ability to take on the establishment and ask for some of the things we need, like more precision medicine trials for our kids?
Definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, we're with our kids and we know them. So behaviours change, things change, dynamics change, and sometimes the professionals just need to listen. It's just as simple as that. And if they don't listen, and Ingrid's very good at listening, so,
yes.
But I've come across many professionals that won't listen, didn't listen, and in the beginning, that's what I accepted. But then as time went on, I realised that wasn't good enough, and it will never be good enough. So that's where we are today.
Caterina, What are the things that you do with both your children now that you think are great that you would recommend to everybody in this room? Because there's the kind of aspirational and the leading and the trying to solve these genetic puzzles. And then there's the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, summer holidays of life when we've got these wonderful people we love, and it's not always an easy road. What are the things that you recommend?
I think first and foremost, getting support is the biggest factor, and also trialling different medications to help our child, because helping them at the end of the day is what helps the family. And, you know, it's all about a quality of life, I suppose, and family stability, and that's where I put that. I remember going to Ingrid, I think it was not last appointment, but the one before, and she said, right, and how's dinner time? And I said, oh my gosh, it's terrible. And she's like, right, we need to get him medicated. This is what needs to happen. Right? So sometimes we need to be told, and we need to listen, and we need to try, and we need to do. And that's...
It's a partnership, is what I hear you saying. Joe, how about you? What are the things that you live on a bush property that makes life really challenging when it comes to getting fancy treatments in Melbourne? Does it also provide a wonderful base of support and a kind of an organic living place for your family? Are there positives to that rural, bucolic lifestyle?
Being on a farming environment with a lot of machinery, we live in a relatively high-risk, high-danger environment. Ryan was ran over by a forklift when he was 3 years old, and things like that happen. But
this shows that I am from New York. I am from New York and know nothing about a farm.
So we take the attitude that my 14-year-old daughter can drive tractors and trucks, and Ryan would love to drive the truck, but we haven't let him, but he can drive a tractor. But we live a normal day-to-day life where they do what they normally would do in a day-to-day environment. Yes, Ryan has to be a bit more supervised, but we live with no regrets. We live, whatever decisions we make, whatever we put him on that, he drives the car, and it is what, there's no regrets. If there's an accident that happens, that will happen. It is part of life. And yes, he's had seizures from high falls when he's been on top of things and he hasn't been listening, and the next thing he come crashing down. So be it. We've been very lucky. He hasn't really hurt himself. They tend to bounce pretty well when they're seizing.
I don't even know where to go with that. So you know where I'm going to go with that is I'm going to go to all of you, since I clearly know nothing about a farm. And I'm, by the way, in full disclosure, married to someone who grew up on a farm, so obviously it hasn't taken. Who in the audience has a question that they would like to ask our amazing panelists? I'll start with you because I saw your hand first. We have the white jacket. Yes, go right ahead.
I don't actually have a question. I have a concern. Caterina, I am so glad that you are in Victoria where you are getting a lot of support with the NDIS. But for everybody else, you need to understand South Australia has had it going for 3 years now, nearly 4. And if we spoke like you did and spoke about it being for the whole family and us needing to be healthy for our children, I can tell you right now there is at least 3 people in this audience, I think there might be 5 though, that have been turned down for that respite that you're getting for Marco, because it's not about us, it's about our child. And there are people who are struggling to get 1 hour of help, not like I have to take my kid with me everywhere, and I have got some support, but it's not respite, it's to get her out into the community. And I'm just worried that everyone hearing you say how it's great and they're helping, that's fantastic, but it's not happening everywhere.
So I'm here representing myself. I'm not here representing the community, first and foremost. Second, I'm not a professional on the NDIS, I'm just a mum. So what it's done for me personally is it's from where I was at baseline 0, I've moved up from baseline 0. So I know of many families where they've been allocated the NDIS and it hasn't worked in their favour. So there's many facets with everything. There's good and bad. I'm talking about my personal experience. I'm not referring to any other family, any other person, any other participant. So for me, where baseline was 0, it depends who you get, when you get it, how much experience they've got. But I'm not going to go into that because that's not what I'm here to talk about. And that's the unfortunate thing about something that has so many variables. That's probably where maybe the government hasn't got it so right. So there's many positives, there are negatives. I'm just here to talk about what my experience is.
I think that sounds like a wise point, and it sounds like if anybody else, I'm just going to do a show of hands, we'll move on, but is anybody having difficulties with NDIS or has questions about it? Okay, so all of you, I want you to eyeball each other. All right, hands up for just 1 minute here, no kidding, because this is how it works. This is how things get better. I highly recommend that when we finish, if you've got 5 minutes, exchange emails. In my experience, not just as a mom of Jackie Butcher, who has KC and Q2, but as a reporter for 30 years now. Yes, I'm that old, maybe more. Anyway, long time. Parents getting together where there's something that's not working can help things work better, but they need to connect to each other, and this is a perfect opportunity to do it. So you all connect and compare, and because even good things can be made better, and if it's not working, then it obviously needs to help. I'm not an expert on South Australia. Thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else have any questions? We have one at the back.
The question was again about the NDIS, and again, it's not to you specifically.
Oh, no.
It's just more as in to, there's a panel and a forum, which is, some of the problems that I see on the Facebook pages, I mean, I'm on the Dravets, but, I hear what other parents say as well, is that if you don't have a specific diagnosis of autism, or you don't have a specific, some of those specific things which ring particular people's bells to give you certain amounts of funding, and you just have a diagnosis of a genetic encephalopathy or developmental disability, then you're just having a lot of difficulty getting the funding, because it depends on who takes your thing and their level of experience. And if some people can't tick boxes, you don't get funding.
May I offer a suggestion? Oh, go ahead, please.
To work towards as a group towards getting genetic epilepsies or encephalopathies or developmental encephalopathies as a group. That's the GETTR group, that's the Dravets, Molly's Fund for Dravets, working together to get those things put on as a recognised diagnosis. And that will improve the life of all of our children and all of those who come after us, because you might get great funding, you might get crap funding, but there are going to be families coming after us with things on the spectrum that are going to continue to have to do these individual fights. And if we can work together as a group to get genetic encephalopathies recognised and put on the list of diagnoses, then we will all, whether it be KCNQ2, sorry, I hope I said
well
that
done.
right.
Impressive, yes.
STINCUP, infantile buttons, all of those things, life will be better. And I think that's something, yes, cures would be great, but we also want to improve the lives of our children and our families now. So how can we as a group, apart from emailing the people who are having problems, also those who have not had problems, how can we, I guess, work with our, whether it's our elective representatives and with someone like Ingrid's backing to try and get her to put this on the diagnostic list?
Does anybody have a suggestion about how to try to make this work better?
Can I answer that? I'm up here.
Oh, sorry, yes.
We have a petition on change.org about this exact thing. It's been up for 6 months, maybe. Just over 25,000 signatories now for exactly this issue. So we spoke to Ingrid last time we were in Melbourne. We're from South Australia, so we're 4 years into the NDIS.
Yeah.
What we petitioned for is, I think we agreed on genetic.
No. Sorry, I wrote the petition.
Can I just say I'm loving this. This is what these groups are for. So we'll just ask you to tell us what go ahead.
Okay, so what the actual petition says is the NDIS needs to recognise Dravet syndrome as a disability. The reason that we chose that as the title is because what we were informed by the Appeals Advocacy Officer in South Australia is the process to getting a disability recognised is that a need needs to be identified, and then what happens is the nation-known expert gets contacted. What was expected would happen was that we would have gone to tribunal and there would have been an appeal process, and during that process, Ingrid should have been contacted. What happened was after we met with Ingrid and we returned to South Australia, we had a massive meeting with the NDIS and we had senior planners involved with the meeting. It was decided that no decision would be made, and instead of reviewing our plan, it got extended. An extension of a plan in South Australia is not a reviewable decision, so there's nothing you can actually do. So we waited another 8 months till we were up again for a review. We had a change of planner again. There was still no answer as to whether the NDIS was going to recognise Dravet syndrome, and we went public on the long weekend and started the petition. In the meantime, we'd already contacted Ingrid's team and asked for a better title to be recommended should Ingrid get contacted. And from what I understand, Ingrid had a better term, which was something like developmental epileptic encephalopathy, which would have captured all of us. What's happened is the NDIS hasn't had that conversation with Ingrid. We have a parliamentary recording of the CEO, David Bowen, saying that in South Australia an error occurred and that we should have been able to list Dravet syndrome. We have since been told by the NDIS that's not possible. And we have now been warned, should we continue to fight on our own, that our daughter's funding will be threatened again.
So don't stream this live.
I don't care. Like, honestly, I'm done. Just bring it at me. Like, really? It's just playing games. Like, it needs to be recognised. So what happens in South Australia is you can only list the disabilities that are on that list. You cannot list something that's not.
I'm going to wrap it there, and I wish we had more time, but let me just say one global thing. One global thing is the world today is not the world tomorrow or yesterday. And there have been a heck of a lot of things that would never happen that change. So it sounds like there's a lot, it's a lot to unpack, and we won't be able to answer every aspect of that. But I think that at the kernel of that, with just my limited hearing of it is, first of all, kudos to you for fighting on behalf of your child and also on the broader community. And clearly there's work left to be done. The specifics of how that happens, I think it sounds like, you know, you're powering forward. If there are other people who want to meet, who are having similar issues, it sounds like you all should connect. And clearly this is something that's emerging. And obviously there is, you know, again, we have a number of different people all up here at the front. And let's just go through very quickly. You're Dravet? Dravet, Singer, 23.1. And KCNQ2. All right, so that is, and a partridge in a pear tree. So we have a variety of different genetic misfires. We have a shared set of experiences and a community that is broad and strong and deep. I often think of it as alphabet soup. You know, you put your spoon in and you pull out a collection of letters and numbers. They might be different. We might not always be able to remember somebody else's letters and numbers, but it doesn't really matter because they're all very similar. I'm going to pause now because I know we're running out of time. Before we go, though, and I want to thank our panelists, I do have one other parent who I would like to bring up at this moment. And this parent is a longtime Dravet powerhouse. So if you would please welcome Kelly to the stage with Molly's Fund. My friend Kelly would like to make a little presentation, and then I'm going to wrap it up. Kelly, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. For those who don't know of me, my name's Kelly Clowassy. You've seen Molly a few times today. Molly, I'll just make this very brief. Molly was diagnosed with Dravet in 2004. I think she was Ingrid's in her first group of research in 2002. And from the time that we lived in Victoria, from 2004 on, Molly became I won't say guinea pig, but she was involved in everything she could possibly be involved in for research. Sadly, Molly passed away, as you know, on the 31st of August 2012. And Molly gave so much to epilepsy and to Dravet syndrome in life that we, as a family, continue to try to do our best to raise funds for Dravet syndrome for research and for bringing the families together. So if Ingrid would like to come up, we are happily and very proud to present our first cheque for $30,000 for research. It's a thank you to all the Dravet families here too. I'm hoping to be working with Sara, and I've just found out about the Danielle. So I'm hoping, you know, we can make this broader for all, and I'm not even going to mention that word, Encephalopathies, I think. So just thank you to everybody who has donated, who has organised fundraisers. We do need more. We are hoping to have Dravet family get-togethers in each state every second year, and the first one will be coming up in the 24th of June in Queensland. So if anybody wants to find out about it, please come and see me. I've got all the information then. So
there's
keep up
Dravet dinner tonight, isn't there? That I forgot to mention before. So go and speak to Anne for the Dravet dinner tonight.
Anne, can you stand up so everybody sees you? Anne, Dravet dinner tonight? All right.
And for all, just to finish, for all the new families, whether it be Dravet or any other revolting type of epilepsy, hope is the only thing you have. And if you don't have hope, then you've got nothing. So please always have hope. We still have hope. We have hope that you guys and your families will, maybe a cure will be found. You know, just to give the child a better quality of life is hope enough. So please don't give up. Please enjoy your life with your beautiful children and love them every day and touch them every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. She is another one of the most amazing parents, and thank you for that donation to our research fund, to all of you. And I think I'm going to bring it to a close. Say thank you very much to Sara and the panel for their fantastic work. But just before you do, I want to thank all the people involved in today. Krista, are you in the room? Are you outside? I can't see you. So Krista has really put together the program. She's been working a day a week on this for the last 6 months, actually, to get it together. And I hope you have found it worthwhile. Please fill out your feedback forms. You'll also get the same sort of feedback form via Eventbrite, so if you don't want to do it on paper, you can do it that way. And that also goes for people listening online. We'd be really interested. It's the first time we've reached out online. I think that we have taken the conference to another level with everything, and I thank all the speakers. I want to thank my team, who are just phenomenal. I don't know if you've seen, but Amy and Georgie here have been doing all the streaming of the questions all day, making them so we can read them, making sure we didn't forget ones when they came through. It's just taken everyone, all of our energy to get today to be where it is, and I want to very much thank them and thank the amazing Sarah James and incredible panel, and we have wine for you all. Thank you.